Hello and welcome to 10 Minute Takes. This is the show where we give you the rating first, then we discuss what we liked and did not like about the movie we just watched. Our rating system is as follows. A movie is either a see it, a wait for it, or a pass it. Today's film is Venom. You ready to rate this one?
I'm ready to rate this.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Wait for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If only the beginning and the ending were better, this film would have been so much more enjoyable for me. Venom tells the story of Eddie Brock, who is an investigative reporter living in San Francisco, who is put on assignment to do a puff piece on Carlton Drake, who owns the Life Foundation. And before he's supposed to go interview this guy, he comes across some information that Carlton Drake is actually experimenting on people that is killing them. And then during his interview with Carlton Drake, he ambushes him with these questions. Carlton Drake has him fired, and then Eddie Brock's life is left in shambles. Through certain circumstances, Eddie Brock finds himself back inside of the Life Foundation, where he then comes in contact with the Venom symbiote, and then Eddie Brock bonds with it. Carlton Drake and the Life Foundation tries to get it back, and that is essentially our story. Now, even though it's a wait for it, the film's not all doom and gloom. There were some things or at least that I did like about it. I had two fundamental problems with this film, and we'll talk about those later. But first, let's start with the things that we liked. So, Sam, what are some of the things that you liked about this film?
I actually think the biggest thing that I liked the most was the interaction between Venom and Eddie.
Yeah.
I liked the way that they interacted with each other. It was very funny and quirky. I also liked, I don't know how to say this in a non-weird way, but I liked the way that Venom moved in his body. Like when he was fighting, and then parts of his body figuration would change into, it's in the trailer, change into Venom. I thought that was really cool when he was in those fighting sequences. Yeah,
they're called tendrils in the comics. I don't think they ever refer to them as tendrils in the movie, but when when Venom extends himself from Eddie Brock, they're considered tendrils, and so when he's fighting, the tendrils are coming out, he's grabbing people, and Venom, in this movie, in the comic books, Venom is kind of portrayed as a singularity of two people, of Eddie Brock and the symbiote. Mm-hmm. But in the movie, the symbiote itself calls itself Venom. And Venom has bonded itself with Eddie Brock.
Right.
So in the comic books, when the symbiote was with Spider-Man, which that's how it started in the comic books, it was Spider-Man first that had the symbiote suit. It just changed the way he thought about things. And then when it got to Eddie, it got into his mind, and he considered himself of two different beings. But in this, Venom's very active. It talks to Eddie. Eddie talks back to it. And the symbiote actually calls itself Venom. It's that was its name on its own planet. And so during those scenes with Venom and Eddie Brock, I agree with you. That was my favorite part of the film.
I also thought that the humor was funny. It was very corny. But I think that's actually what I thought was kind of funny about it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that would resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, it's very much it's a buddy cop movie with just one person. Right. So it's almost you could say a Lethal Weapon, where Eddie Brock is Murtaugh and Venom is Riggs. Mm-hmm. Where Riggs was the loose cannon, I'll do whatever I want, and Murtaugh was the squeaky clean, do it by the books kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And it's that just in one person. So imagine it's Murtaugh talking to himself with Riggs in his head, telling him no, we need to do this. And Murtaugh's no, we can't do that. For people that get the Lethal Weapon reference, that's essentially kind of what this film portrays. One of the other things I was surprised I liked it as much as I did was Michelle Williams, who played Tom Hardy's girlfriend.
I mean, I really liked the relationship, but I didn't like it as much as you did.
It was cute. I didn't think it was a waste.
I didn't think it was a waste. I didn't. Yeah.
She wasn't there to be a damsel in distress, which is usually what those characters wind up being.
Which was really nice.
Yeah. The two fundamental problems that I have with this film was that the film's called Venom. And essentially you want to go to this film to see Venom. Venom really doesn't start until halfway through the film. We don't get Eddie Brock and Venom together until about an hour into the movie. The movie's an hour and 50 minutes long. And so we essentially get probably an hour to an hour and 10 minutes of Eddie Brock and Venom, which is the best part of this film. So you have one half of the film that is a lot of setup for Eddie Brock's character to get him to the point where he meets Venom. And it was kind of boring. Like
the story was boring?
I want to say like the first hour or so before Eddie Brock goes into the Life Foundation and gets the symbiote.
I agree.
It's just kind of, it feels like a lot of setup, and it feels like setup. It doesn't feel like the story's really progressing forward in the manner you want to see a film like this progress forward.
Yeah, and then it just kind of, everything happens at once. And that was one thing that I said I didn't like so much, was the fact that some of the stories didn't feel to me full circle, because I lost the story at times, and I didn't remember what was happening or why certain things in the story was happening, and I felt like it didn't go full circle, which got me a little bit lost, and I didn't understand what was happening until parts of the movie spells it out for you. And then I was like, oh, that's what they're talking about. But it took so long for them to get to that I lost interest in what that buildup should have been.
Yeah. So essentially what Carlton Drake in the film is trying to do, and this is what, in the first hour, this is some of the things that happens. Carlton Drake is actually using the symbiotes to try and bond with humans so humans can live in outer space. That's the point of the symbiotes, why he's trying to bond them to humans, so we can then do space exploration unharmed.
Right, and I'm saying that I remember that in the beginning, and then I remember that, and then I forgot about that. And then they spell it out for you, and then I was like, oh, I shouldn't have needed that.
And that stuff was, there's no motive. There's like a lacking motivation for the villain. He's not really, yes, him killing people is bad, but in no way, shape, or form does that stuff that he's doing to those people really affect Venom and Eddie Brock's story. They don't really interconnect paths until like the last 15 minutes of the movie, which was unfortunate, which brings me to the second thing that I really didn't like about the movie, was that the film is actually really lacking a central villain. You see it in the trailers. There's another symbiote, and it's Riot. Riot's the gray silverish symbiote, and throughout the film, Riot is jumping from host to host, making his way to America. But there is no crescendo to Riot and Venom having any sort of a relationship that brings us to a sort of a slow build to their meeting. When Riot shows up at the end in full form, it doesn't sneak up on you and build to it. It really just hits you in the face like a gong. So instead of like a smooth crescendo, it's all right, now we're here, now Riot's done, or now Riot's been revealed. Now we need to have the big final boss fight of the movie, which was very, very disappointing, because one of my favorite aspects of, I'd say, superhero comic book films is the relationships between the good guys and the bad guys, and there isn't one in this film. You could say that there is one with Eddie Brock and Carlton Drake, but once Riot shows up, Carlton Drake really doesn't mean anything anymore, because then the story sort of shifts to then Riot's agenda. But that's, maybe you probably have like 15 minutes of the film dedicated to that, and it was super disappointing because you never get invested into like that relationship between Riot and Venom, because Riot himself is a personality. He talks, he has his own agenda that he wants to do, but again, it's the last 15 minutes of the movie, and it's super disappointing. That would be like the Dark Knight with the Joker being like in the shadows, and then like the last 15 minutes the Joker wants to unleash chaos, but you never invested in the Joker. And the whole film is dedicated to like the Batman fighting the mob, and then the Joker at the very end appears for like the last 15 minutes. It's like, oh, that seems kind of random, which is kind of like what this felt like. It was super disappointing because Riot and Venom felt like they could have had sort of like a Joker Batman kind of play back and forth, with like Riot and Venom being of the same ilk.
Yeah, I see. I follow what you're saying.
So,
that's kind of what I was getting at before. It's just that some of the things didn't come full circle, and then you lose interest. So I lost interest of the storyline about halfway through. But I enjoyed watching Venom and Eddie, and that was one of the things that I enjoyed about the whole movie. But like you're saying, it just, you lose interest and things were forgettable. So I forgot about the storyline. And then when it did come up, I was like, I don't remember this until they basically say it.
Yeah, Carlton Drake has his storyline. He wants to explore space. And then Riot comes up and he has his agenda, but their agendas are not one and the same. So then, like, when Riot does show up, his plan then supersedes Carlton Drake's. There is no, like, melding of the two. It's Carlton Drake, and all of a sudden Riot shows up, and it's Riot's thing. And there's no time to get invested in Riot's plan or to even really care about Riot's plan because it hits you, like I said, like a gong in the face.
Right.
There is no smooth transition into what he's doing. It's just he appears. It's time for the final boss fight of our movie, which it felt like almost like a video game type of setup.
Yeah.
Where it's like you go through a level, and at the end of the level, you're like, oh, there's going to be a boss fight here. I wonder what this boss fight's going to be like.
That's a good way to put it.
Which is like with movies, that's not how you want it to be. You don't want to go into the third act with it being random. With movies, you want that relationship to crescendo to your third act. So, like, one of my favorite action movies is The Matrix. With The Matrix, Agent Smith is the big bad guy, and we crescendo to Agent Smith and Neo's fight in the subway, which then brings us to the hallway scene with Neo and Agent Smith, and there's a just giant crescendo that works super well.
Gotcha.
And it's the same thing with, like, The Dark Knight. There's a crescendo with Batman and the Joker that brings us into the third act.
I see what you're saying.
Whereas it felt like we're playing this is like a Dark Souls video game where you don't know where you're going or who you're going to fight, and then when all of a sudden you show up at the boss fight, you get like a little cutscene. The boss is like, this is what I want to do, and you're like, oh, now I guess we got to stop this, and it's like it's a 10-minute turnover.
Yeah.
Those were my fundamental issues. It's Tom Hardy. The other issue that I had, I don't like that Tom Hardy played Eddie Brock as a frumpy loser for pretty much the entirety of the movie.
But I think that kind of goes with what you were talking about before, as the entire movie he is looked at as this, loser man, and then all of a sudden at the very end of the movie everything's all better again. There was no build up to that. He didn't work to get it, he just got it. So when we saw it at the end, we were just kind of like, okay,
yeah,
great, good job.
I think the other part of the problem is that this movie, essentially, once Venom shows up, I feel like the movie takes place over the course of like one single night. Once he becomes Venom, I don't feel like we ever saw daylight again.
Oh, that's right.
I think once he becomes Venom, the rest of the movie then takes place over the course of like 12 hours.
No, I think you're right.
Because it's Venom. He has a couple of action sequences, winds up at another facility, and it's probably like 2 days. No, maybe not even 2 days. But it's really like a really short time period that once Venom shows up.
Once the movie started to get going, it was so quick, and then it was over. So I think maybe that's why it feels like it only happened in one night, because by the time that Venom took place of his body or came together with Eddie, it just moved so quickly that it felt like it was very short.
Yeah. And the other thing is that other people are comparing this to like a mid-90s comic book film or early 2000s comic book film. And for me, when the film started, I didn't get the 90s comic book vibe. I actually got like a 90s romantic comedy vibe. Because within the first 10 minutes of the film, we're hit with like 3 pop songs. And it felt like I was watching the opening to like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days with like the pop
Maybe
songs.
That's why I like the song so much. I was like, I like this.
Yeah, but it's just like, it's pop music. It's stuff that you would see in the 90s sitcom.
Yeah, that's true.
It's How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. It's
10 Things I Hate About You.
Yeah, it's the first act of this film is very much in that vibe. And it was kind of weird to me. It was like, why does this feel like this is a 90s rom-com that we're getting into?
I think that's what they were kind of trying to go for with the relationship between the two, and to build that part of the relationship in the movie. Maybe that's where that's coming from.
Yeah.
But I thought the music was nice. I thought it was fine.
That's okay. It just immediately, like when you put pop music like that in a movie, it immediately dates it for me.
Right. Yeah, you've said that before.
And I don't like it when movies
feel
do that.
dated. It feels like if I watch this movie in a year or two, it's going to feel a lot older than it is.
Yeah. And the other thing, absolutely no connection to the MCU. No Spider-Man. There's even things that Spider-Man references that Venom kind of half references, but I don't think Marvel's giving Sony the okay to use it. So like Eddie Brock used to work in New York, and he worked for a place called the Daily Globe.
Okay.
That's supposed to be the Daily Bugle. Eddie Brock used to work for the Daily Bugle in the Spider-Man world, and him and Peter Parker worked together. And Peter Parker, when he had the black symbiote, had Eddie Brock fired from his job, and that's where his hate for Spider-Man comes from. And then when Spider-Man removes the symbiote then bonds with Eddie. Eddie then gets the memory of what the symbiote knew. So when the symbiote was bonded with Spider-Man, it knew it was Peter Parker. So Eddie Brock and the symbiote team up to try and kill Spider-Man. Because they both worked at the Daily Bugle. And that was Venom's main thing in the comic books.
So is Venom a good guy or a bad guy? Because I didn't get that.
He's an anti-hero. He's someone that wants to...
Anti-hero?
Yeah. In the comic books, he wants to kill Spider-Man. But Eddie Brock is conscious enough to know that they shouldn't hurt innocent people. Yeah,
he's a nicer Deadpool.
Yeah, you could say that. And that's another thing that I thought this film could have done, was that Deadpool built its origin movie, the first one, out of a big action sequence. So a big action sequence happens, and they use that action sequence to build the first half of the movie out of, because Deadpool, if you tell Deadpool in chronological order, Ryan Reynolds doesn't actually become Deadpool until like halfway through the movie. If you remove that action sequence that they build the first half of the film out of. The highway sequence.
That is a really cool sequence.
So, I feel like had Venom I would have been perfectly okay with Venom intercutting Eddie Brock as Venom, as him as already with Venom, with how he got to be Venom. So I'd be okay with the scene as him as Venom, flashback. Him as Venom, flashback. So we're intercutting Venom. So Venom is spruced throughout the film instead of just dedicated to a chunk of like 50 minutes at the end. Because the biggest problem that I've seen people have had is like that first act is just, ugh.
It's long.
Yeah.
I think it's just long.
All right. We've gone quite a bit over time on this one. This is like almost the length of 2 takes. Do you have anything else you want to say? Any other notes?
My final thought?
Yeah, sure.
My final thoughts was just that it doesn't seem to measure up with the Marvel movies that we've been getting. It was good. It was fine. It just wasn't what I was hoping it was going to be as far as all the Marvel movies that we've been getting in the last couple years.
It's not great. It's not terrible. It's kind of there. If it had more Venom in it, it'd be a lot better.
Okay, that's
also, the film has 2 post-credit scenes. The mid-credit scene that's in this is a tease for what could be a sequel. I thought it was kind of goofy.
The second one was awesome.
If you saw this movie, we're not going to talk about it here, the mid-credit scene. If you saw it, let us know what you thought of the mid-credit scene. Personally, for me, it was a little goofy. I know who they were teasing. It just came off as a little strange. The post-credit scene, the second one, non-Venom related, but it's essentially, I don't want to give it away, but if you do see it, the post-credit scene is pretty cool. It's a tease for another Sony film coming out a little later, and it actually made me really excited for the movie that's coming out later.
I was always excited for the movie, but this one kind of sold it for me.
Yeah. So, all right, that's it for me. Is that it for you?
That's it for me.
All right, that's it for us on this episode of 10-Minute Takes. I know this is not a 10-minute take. This went long, but I was super excited for this film, but it is what it is. If you saw it, let us know what you thought in the comments. And as always, if you like what you saw here, subscribe because we got more coming. A Star is Born is coming on Saturday morning. So stay tuned for that one. All right, thanks for watching. See you next time.
Like and subscribe.
Okay, like and subscribe.
Make
Got it?
Okay.
Okay. Goodbye. Have a nice day.
Have a nice life.
Oh, yeah.
Everything in the movie. Have a nice life. It's like so creepy. So creepy. What I didn't understand is why did everyone say have a nice life if they're all completely different characters that don't even intertwine with each other, but apparently in this universe, everybody says have a nice life.
Beats me.